The new dietary guidelines for Americans were released yesterday, January 7th. And unfortunately, I think you're actually going to hate what I have to say about it. I gotta be honest with you, I went into this guns blazing. I was gonna film this video yesterday, and I went into it after reading headlines and all these things being like, all right, how can we rip this to shreds? But then I thought to myself, Elena, what do you tell everybody? Read the actual source and try to be objective. So I did that, and when I did, I thought, shit. And I thought that because I was like, a lot of this stuff is stuff that I actually recommend. I will say right off the bat, I hate the graphic. And I hate the graphic because when you just look at it, it's very much telling you that the majority of your intake should come from meat and vegetables. And then we see that the whole grains are down at the bottom, vilifying carbs yet again. And I thought we were past this. But when you actually read the descriptions of things, this is when I was like, oh no. Because it says eat the right calories you need based on age, sex, height, weight. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. It says protein should be 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram, which is actually right in line with what I typically recommend because I've found that to be the most effective for muscle building, not just in the general population, but also in eating disorders when they've restricted and need to rebuild some muscle. They're still saying to eat a variety of fruits and vegetables, 3 servings of vegetables per day and 2 servings of fruit per day is the goal, which is pretty much in line with what previous dietary recommendations have said. They say focus on whole grains, 2 to 4 servings per day. Again, similar to previous recommendations. A little bit more of a niche thing, but what I actually did like was that they recommended eating full-fat dairy because that's something that I recommend to a lot of people, again, especially in eating disorder recovery because of the conjugated linoleic acid that's in it. And I don't like how they worded the gut health thing. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I do like that they addressed fermented foods because I do talk with people about eating fermented foods, especially for regrowing that gut microbiome, specifically when you're coming from an eating disorder situation. After reading through all of the dietary guidelines, I actually thought to myself, okay, this isn't as bad as the headlines were making it seem. Classic. And a lot of the recommendations are very similar to previous recommendations. Now, there are things about this that I don't like. Let's talk about that. The biggest thing that's an overarching theme in this entire dietary guidelines that I don't like is them vilifying and saying that you should completely eliminate all processed foods. The reason I don't like that, as many of you know, is because sometimes that's the only access people have to food. Sure, I would love if everybody could get things from the locally grown farm, but we know that that's just not realistic. Also, when it comes to ARFID, sometimes texturally speaking, things that are processed are what's best for those individuals to actually get some nourishment in, and I would rather them eat that than not eat anything. So I really don't like the vilifying of the processed foods. I also don't like is the contradictory information about healthy fats here. So down here it's saying that you should have healthy fats, things like meats, poultry, eggs, and then also it lists down there butter and beef tallow. Biggest eye roll ever. But then over here, it says in general, saturated fat consumption should not exceed 10% of your total daily calories. But if you were to eat all of those things that they're recommending, like the poultry and eggs and cooking things in butter and beef tallow, you're easily going to go over that saturated fat recommendation. So it's very contradictory, and I don't like that at all. Back to what I said in the beginning about the shape of the pyramid and the whole grains being at the bottom, I hate that they're calling out specifically white bread and flour tortillas and crackers. Why in God's name would those things be specific things that you're calling out? So it's not as horrible as I thought it was going to be, but here's the biggest thing, and maybe this makes me the biggest pessimist in the world. I don't really care what the dietary guidelines say. That sounds terrible, but here's the truth. Less than 10% of Americans actually adhere to the dietary guidelines. In fact, only 32% of Americans even knew what My Plate was and was recommending. So the dietary guidelines are not making or breaking America's health. Because we change them doesn't mean that someone's going to be unhealthy or more healthy because people aren't adhering to it. And ultimately, it doesn't change how I treat my patients. I go based off of the research that we have, and I treat people individually, meaning I'm going to look at your overall health status, your socioeconomic status, what your situation is in terms of like living and work and all of those things and make decisions for you specifically. So yeah, call me a pessimist, but like, I don't really care.